Okay, so welcome everybody who is watching this series of UMAC Origins, the series of interviews that we are conducting with various people who have had a long association with UMAC. And this, of course, is part of a series to celebrate the 20th anniversary of UMAC being an international committee of ICOM. And today we have a very special guest who is joining us from beautiful downtown Uppsala, Ing-Marie Munktell. We're very fortunate to get to speak to Ing-Marie in this series because those of you who have had a long association with UMAC will probably know Ing-Marie from she attended many conferences. She was an early board member, and of course she was for many years the director of the fantastic Gustavianum at the University of Uppsala. And now I believe Ing-Marie is the chair of the Swedish group Cultural Heritage Without Borders. So even when you retire from your university work, there's still plenty more work to be done. Ing-Marie, welcome to the series, and how are things in Sweden at the moment?
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's fantastic to be with you today and with all our UMAC friends. I'm Ing-Marie Munktell, and I'm a medieval historian originally from the west coast of Sweden, Gothenburg University. I had my PhD in 1982, and it was about big estates in Sweden, and I was writing about the people working in the medieval ages. And most of all, I wanted to write about women, but it was difficult to find women in the sources. So I've always been interested to disseminate knowledge and to give away what I have learned. So museums became the platform for me. I like museums, and I started my career at a canal and shipping museum. I was headhunted, and I didn't know anything about ships and boats, but I learned a lot.
Fantastic.
And then I jumped to an art museum, and that was here in Uppsala, the art museum here. So it was a big jump, but it was a fantastic museum, and I was running it for 4 years. Then I went to Stockholm because the facilities for the Museum of Art here in Uppsala changed, and I got a position at the Historical Museum, the National Antiquity Museum in Stockholm. And there I was head of the pedagogical department, which was very good for me because I like to be a pedagogue, and I very often acted as a Viking mother. So I've been acting all my career through, and I like the audience, you know. And then I also made the Millennium Celebration in Stockholm and the Cultural Capital Year. And that was also perfect for me. 1 year in the Millennium Celebration, I established a Viking village in the center of Stockholm.
Wow.
It was fantastic. But may I continue?
Oh, please do, please do. Keep going.
I was living in Uppsala, and I traveled every day to Stockholm, and I had 4 children at home, 2 horses, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and sometimes a husband when he was not traveling all over the world.
That's a complete menagerie.
So when the position as director of the University Museum, and it was a new University Museum, you know, it was opened in 1997, and it was a very brave rector of the university who opened up the Gustavianum as a window to all collections in the university. I got the position, and that's how I started being in the university museum world. And I can say from the beginning that university museums were not very well known in Sweden. Most collections were hidden in different departments, and people around didn't know what treasures there were. So, wow, I could be the director of a university museums, and this is the oldest university in Scandinavia, founded 1477, and a lot of stories to tell, and I want to tell stories.
Mm-hmm. It's wonderful
So
to
that's
hear.
my background, Andrew.
It's fantastic to hear you saying that part of your interest and connection with museum work was the desire to tell stories and the desire to perform, because of course.
Yeah.
All good pedagogues are also good performers, so that's delightful, and I think it's probably a similar aspiration or drive that makes many people end up in museum work. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So when you started at the Gustavianum, that was a new position, was it?
Yeah, the museum opened 1997. I came the year 2000, and it was one person before me who established the museum facilities. Mm-hmm. So I was the new, coming from outside.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's great. Now, that would have been just before, or actually, that would be about at the same time as there was early discussions about the need for a university museum group. So your timing seems to have been just perfect for coming into university museum world to sort of start connecting with some of the those early discussions about whether there was a need for this. Now, am I correct in saying that you attended some of the early meetings? There was one in Scotland and one in Paris, I believe. Were you at both of those?
I didn't attend that in Scotland. That in Scotland was before me, but the one in Paris was very important.
Yeah, and that was one. That was an OECD one. Yep.
Yeah, it was in the autumn 2000, and I had my position for half a year or so.
Mm-hmm.
So, but before that, because I know how important networking is, in Europe, I had another connection in spring, and it was with some German colleagues, and I went to a meeting in Halle, Leipzig, in spring the year 2000, and that was the first networking I made in my new position. And we made an exhibition together, 12 universities in Europe, and we made these treasures of university collections in Europe. I can show you this one.
Ah, fantastic.
Yeah.
I think I've seen
that.
So
that was my first contact with colleagues. Yeah.
Fabulous. That
didn't exist any other.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that you did some joint exhibition work early on, because just from my experience, the same thing happened in Australia. There was the first bit of networking that happened in Australia actually produced an exhibition called Cinderella's Gems, which was all about, the sort of choice objects that were hidden away in universities. And it was a touring collection, mainly of artwork, I believe. So it's interesting that the same thing is happening in Europe at the same time as what's happening on the other side of the world in Australia. So that's really quite extraordinary. What was your general reaction when you suddenly discovered that there were all these colleagues in other university museums in Europe who did you find you faced similar sorts of problems, or you had similar sort of issues with your work in a university museum?
I was a member of ICOM for at least 20 years before I came to the university world.
Yep.
And also the Swedish Museum Association. And I have always been networking. That was also something very important when I was working in Stockholm, to have networking done, because if you can network, you can also have sort of financing for what you want to do for your visions and
Very
what you want
important.
to create.
Yep.
So networking is absolutely essential as a museum director, I think.
Yep. Yep. That's fabulous. So with what was the atmosphere like at that the OECD meeting in Paris? We've had a couple of other conversations from some other people who attended that meeting, and I keep hearing the story that the presentations were very interesting, but the informal conversations were even more interesting. Is that a fair summation?
Yeah, I have, because the informal conversations were absolutely the most important thing. The theme of the meeting was managing university museums. And this was the first time I met colleagues from all over the world. Peter Stanbury was there, and Stephen de Klerk and Peter Tyrrell, and some colleagues from Europe also. So it was so important because these people I met having dinners and drinking some wine and talking and talking. We met, and you know, some of us became the first board in Barcelona next year.
Yep.
And we had very good contacts and a good feeling together, I think. Yeah.
There was kind of what do you think was in people's minds at the time as to what they wanted to achieve by proposing a new international committee of ICOM?
I think we have to talk about what we all realized, that university museums were invisible and in many places not recognized by the university managements.
Yep.
So I remember the first years we discussed a lot about how to deal with advocacy and the university management, and we talked about the rectors conference, the platform where the rectors met to have talked to them and make them realize that these collections could be used in so many ways as infrastructure for research and for doing open up museums for the audience, for the people, the world around. It was unknown collections, I think.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comment, because others have said that there was this feeling amongst many people at the start of UMAC that they weren't being, that many university museums weren't being used to their full capacity, simply because the leadership of many universities didn't understand how they could be used to benefit the business of the university. Do you think that's a fair? Yep, sure.
Yeah. May I tell you a story from my first year? I had a meeting with the university director, the administrative director, and I said, of course, I need more money. And he said, oh, universities are for research and education, not for museums, you know. So there is no extra money for you. So that was my starting point. So
that's an excellent starting point.
And that's also one of the topics we must lift, because still all over the world, we're working with too small resources to what we need to and what we can do if we are properly served from the universities.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting, because lots of people say the same thing, that one of the main jobs that they felt for a new international committee for university museums would have been to try and raise the status of university museums within their own organisations. And there seem to be, many people have said things like the university leadership did not necessarily see that university museums could be used for part of the third mission, for part of engaging with the broader community and things like that. They had this kind of narrower view that, well, our main things are turning out research and teaching students and things like that. But it was kind of, museums were seen as something that was not really core business, if you like. And I have a similar story. I remember when I was working at a university museum in Australia in the 1990s, we had a new head of our department, and I did the same sort of thing. I went along and said, well, look, I need more money to tell stories and put on exhibitions and things like that. And his response was, but universities aren't about museums. We're not a warehouse for nostalgia, was the actual term he used. And yeah, it was quite interesting that seems to have been one of the very important early functions of UMAC, was to try and sort of break that down. Did you then attended some of the early UMAC meetings after that Paris meeting? Did you attended Barcelona?
Barcelona, yes, of course I did.
Which of course was Barcelona was of course the first meeting where UMAC was accepted as a new international committee.
Yeah. And I became at the first board, you remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I also had a talk, and my talk was about the position of staff in University Museum. And it was said, changing attitudes, the Uppsala example. I was talking about my staff, and staffing then became my big thing in UMAC. You know, I was chair of the working group number 3 about staffing for several years.
Excellent. Excellent. And it's really interesting. I don't know whether it's the case in Sweden, but I know that in Australia now, you will have people who are established with a museum career will actually see some benefits in spending part of that career in a university setting, because it gives you a different set of perspectives to running a museum and a collection than working for, say, a civic museum or a different sort of a museum. Yeah. That's terrific. And what was the first meeting at Barcelona like? Was it well attended, and was it very? Were people aspirational that UMAC would be able to do good things for university museums?
I think it was very inspiring, and we went from Barcelona. And we thought, now we can do it. Now we can establish this as a real good ICOM committee. And this meeting was also the first time I met Marta Lorenzo, our chair. She was
current
there
president,
and
yes.
had a paper. Yes.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, were you involved, or did you hear about some of the discussions about establishing UMAC? That there was some people have told us there was some resistance within ICOM to the idea of an international committee for university museums. Some people believe that maybe university museums should belong to their individual disciplinary groups. If you have an art museum, you could belong to an ICOM committee for art, or if you had a natural history museum, you could belong to an ICOM committee for natural history. So there was that kind of resistance. Did you have a sense of that at the time, do you think?
No, not much. I think most of us were very aware of the importance of having a common UMAC committee for all disciplines, because we were different from non-university museums in the other world. So we really needed a platform for us, all of us, different kinds of museums all over the world, because we are so different.
Yes. And how do you sort of understand some of those differences? Because sometimes it's very difficult to explain the differences to somebody who is from a non-university museum.
Yes, in the non-university museum world, we have more professional staff, I would like to say, for different purposes. Like we have special pedagogues, special marketing people, and also people doing research and so forth. So that's the professional level is, I would like to say, higher also on about taking care of the objects. What I realized was that people in university museums didn't take care of objects in a proper way in many ways. There were no archives, there were no conservation, they couldn't afford. So what we have done in non-university museum is, I think, taking better care of what originally is our common world heritage, because it is world heritage we're treating. So having this university museum split up in many different departments didn't give the proper resources to take care. I think that's an important point too to take up.
Yep, very true. Now, after the Barcelona meeting and after you're now installed as a member of the first board, did you also get the chance to attend some of the other early meetings of UMAC?
Yes, one of the best was in Sydney at Macquarie University. It was 2002. And Andrew, I remember very well your sculptural park. It was fantastic. And what also one of my ideas to work with art in combination with science and what can happen then. It was such a good starting point for many of my exhibitions, temporary exhibition was about combining art and science.
I think
So thank you.
That's a wonderful observation, and I think that one of the things that university museums can possibly do better than non-university museums is explore those areas between disciplines, and that's simply because there is so much varied expertise that is at your disposal on campus as it is. Our sculpture park is quite a feature of Macquarie University. There's some interesting stories there, which I might tell you later on when we're not recording this. But anyway, okay, that's great. Yes, I remember you from the Sydney meeting, which of course was organised essentially by Peter Stanbury, and we also managed to visit Canberra as well, and we saw a number of different universities. We also visited and had some of the sessions at Sydney University, I believe, too. So the Gustavianum, quite a remarkable museum. And I know I was fortunate enough to go to the conference a few years later in 2005 that you organised in Sweden at the Gustavianum. And I know it. I knew of it beforehand because one of our senior leadership group at Macquarie University she was the provost, and she used to talk all the time about how wonderful the University of Uppsala was, and in particular how wonderful the Gustavianum was. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that particular museum? Because I think it's one of the really remarkable European museums, European university museums.
Yes, it is the oldest preserved university building in Uppsala now. It was established in 1622, and then the university had existed for already since 1877, but it's the only still existing university building. And it was the university until 1887 when the so-called new building opened up on the other side of the park. And it is very special also because from the beginning, there was no anatomical theater on the top of it. So it was a medicine professor coming in the 60s, 50s. He had went to Leiden and he had seen an anatomical theater. And he came back to Uppsala and he said, I need an anatomical theater for my medicine students. And you know, there were in Uppsala then just 5 or 6 medicine students. And opposite to the Gustavianum, you have the big medieval cathedral. Yep. And theology was the big science then. And they protested, of course, cutting in human bodies. No, not here in Uppsala. And the university management said, no, it will cost too much to make an anatomical theater on the top of the building. Yep. But this Olof Rudbeck, he was very persistent. So he also know how to bring in money. He said, if I can build it, I can invite the people from the city to have a look on this. Inside the body, it is interesting. So he managed and built the anatomical theater on the top of the roof, and it was finished in 1663. And you know, we had a photo there with the UMAC people.
Yes, I remember.
And they made dissections there for at least 100 years. But yep. His problem, the professor's problem, was to find bodies because it was only murderers and those who killed themselves who could be the body, so to say. And we had only 3,000 inhabitants in Uppsala those days. So yep. He was doing the dissections on dogs and pigs and so forth. And yep. he absolutely found the lymphatic system. So it was a very fantastic.
Yeah, so yes. That was one of his big advances in understanding of anatomy was the lymphatic system.
Yes. Fantastic. He was also a fantastic architect, and he made the drawings for the anatomical theater. He was engineer, and there are a lot of good things in Uppsala still, which has his sign, so to say. Yep. But he died in early 1703, and it was after the big fire in Uppsala, so I think he was a bit depressed of that. But this was still the university in the 18th century when Carl von Linnaeus was acting here, and many other famous professors. But in 1887, the university moved to a new building, and the university library, Carolina Rediviva, had been established for 1841. So then the university was a bit low, and in the 20th century, you could study archaeology, Egyptology, and things like that in the building. So it was not until in the 1990s when this very brave rector, Stig Strömholm, decided to open up as a university main building. They had to move to other facilities, archaeology and Egyptology. So he brought collections from all over the university up to this building. And we have fantastic collection. And also in Sweden, the next 2 biggest art collections in Sweden. So that's a story.
That's a fantastic story. And you know, if you were if you were a leader of a university that had that kind of history, you'd really want to tell that story. And I remember the visit to the anatomical theatre during the conference, and the thing that I really remember from that was we were all standing around in the tiered viewing platforms there, so that you could look down upon the dissection that was occurring during the demonstrations. And a lot of people were thinking, you know, you can't sit down here, you have to stand up, and the barriers are sort of right up here. And why is that? Why is that? And somebody said, it may even have been you. Well, that's because so many students watching the dissections used to faint. And if they passed out with the high barriers there, they wouldn't fall down on top of other students. I thought that was wonderful.
That was me telling the story.
Yes, I thought so.
For 200 people standing.
Yeah, and a fantastic story because it gives you some real sort of, and because you're on that site, it gives you real insights into the historical nature of the pedagogy and how sort of, direct and I hate to use this word, but how visceral the experience was of an anatomical theatre. No, that was marvelous. And look, actually, I managed to find a few old pictures of the conference. I might try, if you'll bear with me for a while, I might just try and see if I can share them. And here to start off with is can you see that, Ing-Marie?
No?
No? Oh, okay.
I cannot.
Yeah, I have terrible problems sharing slides, unfortunately. Yeah, are you seeing anything now?
No, nothing.
Okay. Well, I might just abandon that. Sorry about that. That might have been a complete failure, I'm afraid. But nevertheless, it was a terrific conference. Now, did you what sort of actually prompted you to want to put on that conference and bring all these international guests to your museum?
It was, of course, because it's a fantastic museum, and it is very special to open up like a window. I must show you my book, Museum Gustavianum, Window to the Surrounding World. Here you can see.
Fantastic.
At least you can see the anatomical theatre.
Yes, of course.
That was
that's much better than trying to much better than trying to share a screen on Zoom, because I had a similar picture. So that's great. Thank you very much for saving the day, because we do need to see a picture of the Gustavianum.
Yeah, and of course, my motive was also to show to the university management how important this was, bringing all these very, very professional people to Uppsala. And I also had the city with me, because the city was positive, and they also sponsored me so we could have that banquet at the castle, and big dinners and things like that. So it was all about networking, and the whole city knew that you were there, all of you were there.
Yep,
and it was a lift for my museum and my work.
Yeah, it was fantastic too. It was a great conference, and I remember we had a reception in Uppsala Castle as part of the conference, which was a very enjoyable evening. It was also good too. It was one of the earlier conferences that I attended, but you did manage to get people from all around the world attending, which was great to have that sort of international group there. Yeah, a wonderful conference. Now, did you go?
Andrew, I would like to say, may I also, we ended up in Helsinki. Don't forget that. It was very interesting for all our colleagues also to see the University Museum in Helsinki. Kati Heinamies brought us to Helsinki for the last weekend, and Sun did a fantastic tour with the ferry to Helsinki.
Yep. Now that was it's really interesting. One of the good things about UMAC conferences in the past, I think, has been that the fact that when you go to a new a university you might not have visited before, you get a sense of the whole sort of culture of the district and the whole sort of culture of the universities. And we do get to see other university museums. I remember part of the trip to your museum was we had a fantastic tour of some of the storage areas. You had beautiful air-conditioned storage areas. We got to see that. So one of the great things about UMAC conferences is you get a real sense of the culture at that university, and in that location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's really terrific. Now, I guess we probably might think about finishing up pretty soon, but maybe would you actually have any kinds of reflections on what you think UMAC has achieved in our 20-year history, and perhaps what work there still is left to do. What do you think?
Yeah, I think what UMAC has achieved is visibility, as we talked about in the beginning, for the whole world to say that university museums exist and can be used in so many different ways in infrastructure for research and for all people to have an experience of what it is all about. What we are still missing is maybe even more contact with the surrounding world around us. What is going on in the world, and how can we be a platform also with all that knowledge we have from university to support democracy and human rights, and more being more provocative, going out with all the strength and what we have of knowledge from all kind of different disciplines. We can use that even more provocative in the world around us. I think that's the future.
I think, I think I'd agree with that too, in as much as you would expect a university, given the role of universities in society, you would expect university museums to really be experimental, to really test issues, and to really kind of even be on the cutting edge of museology, trying to do new ways of communicating ideas, of provoking discussions and things like that. And after all, there are so many critical areas that desperately need discussion in the world today. Okay, we won't mention any individual ones, but look, I think that's absolutely terrific. It's been wonderful to talk to you, Ing-Marie, and now perhaps you might tell us a little bit about what you're doing now in your post-university museum life. I noticed that you're now with the Cultural Heritage Without Borders group. Would you like to tell us something about what keeps you busy these days?
I've been very busy for at least 20 years with the Cultural Heritage Without Borders, working in the Balkan countries after the Balkan Wars. And it has been a lot of working with leadership, because leadership is also one of my big interests. So that is one thing I've been doing for many years. And also in the university, I have been writing a second book, and it's about cultural heritage and peace. So it came last year. And
Fantastic.
Sometimes I take care of students also. So yesterday I had 10 international students talking about this landscape, going back 7,000 years and forth. So it's very interesting. And I have a mentor for several international students also. So that's my day today. And I also have 4 children and 7 grandchildren, so there's no problem in what to do during the days. That's fantastic. Thank you, Andrew.
There are never any problems with things to do, and it's interesting that even in retirement you end up still, you never dissociate yourself from your earlier working life. You're still actively involved in what's going on with the university, and of course with all those sort of current issues and things like that. Ing-Marie, I certainly hope that we get a chance to see, well, I hope that the world gets a chance to travel again and we get a chance to see you again, and of course your fantastic partner who has accompanied you on a number of your visits to other UMAC meetings. Please pass on my best regards to him. And it's been wonderful to catch up with you and hear about your thoughts on the early days of UMAC. And it's interesting too, because you've told what seems to be a very familiar story, in as much as round about the close of the last century, there was this big issue with visibility of university museums and collections. And I think you've resolved that in spectacular fashion at the University of Uppsala. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime. And for those people who are watching our UMAC Origins series, thank you for watching it. Thank you for putting up with me as the host of this. I think, having spoken to Ing-Marie, I think I'm now going to be relieved of my duties, and they're going to pass back to Marta for the next few interviews. So Marta is finally letting me out of this small box and allowing me to go on and do other things, which is great. But Ing-Marie, let's finish up here. Thank you very much again. And I look forward to seeing you at a UMAC meeting in the future.
Thank you, Andrew. See you in Dresden next year.
Look forward to it. Yep, Dresden should be fantastic.